welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And thank you for joining us as we celebrate diverse voices in arts, culture, and community. Today, special treat. I am joined by an award-winning cartoonist with a unique artistic voice. Originally from the East Coast, his work has left an indelible mark in various publications like Vice, Birdie, and Denverite. From contributing to documentaries for Colorado Public Television to illustrating captivating short stories, his versatile talent shines through. Please welcome Karl Christian Krumpholz. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here.
You know how I like really hit that T at the end, the T that's not there.
Yes, I totally fine. I lived with this name my entire life, so I've heard it pronounced all different ways.
I got that directly from a podcast, and I spoke about it, and I was like, "Stop stepping on my man Karl. I want to hear his bit."
Yeah.
So again, thank you for making the time, and I'm glad we were able to sort of, reconnect in this latter part of the year. We're recording this, in December, and I think I met you initially and became aware of your work, and now I have like several pieces of your work in the studio. I became aware of you at the Small Press Expo. Mm-hmm. So I want to go back before that, obviously. And could you tell us a bit about your journey? I see sort of, East Coast as the origination of it, like you're an East Coast guy. And then you've moved into, the sort of West and this renowned career and working with various publications. But I want to get that sort of, origin story, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in Philadelphia, PA. And I used to work, this back in the 90s, I used to work at a comic shop on South Street. So that's kind of like where when I started doing comics, that was around that time. And my original comics that I did this comic called Angst Boy Comics, which was basically a depressing take on my own life. And it was very, very rough, primitive, very zine-like. I was just kind of starting out, seeing how to do stuff like how to put together pages, how to put together panels, how to tell a story. And I continued doing that comic for a couple of years. I left Philly, I moved up to Boston. I was settled in there and continued doing it, printing more issues. I started going to comic shows. I started going out of state to comic shows. So at one of those trips, I was down I was asked to exhibit in New Orleans at a show. So I was down there for the weekend, and I met this young lady who eventually became my wife. The problem is she lived in Denver and I lived in Boston. Mm-hmm. So we did a long distance thing for about 2 years. And then after about 2 years, we're like, okay, one of us has to move. And of course, then my girlfriend, she was kind of like, well, I just bought an apartment, so I guess I have to move. That's basically how I got to Denver. And it's been a bit over 10 years since I've been here. And then once I came here, I started falling in with the comic crowd here, and I started developing my style and my stories. Like I moved on from Angst Boy, and I did some work with SLG Publishing. I moved on from that, and I started basically telling city stories. I did a comic series called 30 Miles of Crazy, which is basically true stories about people I've met, and something odd happened to them, and so I illustrated it. And I did a bunch of issues of that, and again, developing the talent. And I met another cartoonist, Noah Van Sciver, who was living out here at the time, and he was just about to leave Denver. I think this is when he was moving to Vermont. And he was doing a weekly comic for the Westward, which is the local independent alternative newspaper out here. And basically, after he left, I got his gig. He suggested, he's like, let Karl do it. And so that's how I got to do even more stories about the city, specifically in this case, Denver, Colorado. And in doing that comic, a weekly comic for the Westward. That was became the basis of my later book, which was Queen City, which is all just about Denver, Colorado, because I started doing that basically to learn about this city. Because again, I'm from the East Coast. This is my wife's town, so I was like, okay, let me learn about the history, let me learn about the buildings, and that's how that basically developed. And things kind of just went on from there. My weekly comic was canceled, but it was canceled because of the lockdowns and COVID and stuff like that. The newspaper is kind of like, we can't do a weekly comic because we can't pay our bills because everything's closed, blah, 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 blah. And I still do work for the Westward, but it's not weekly. Like maybe once every couple months I do a feature for them. But that's when I started doing my comic called Lighthouse in the City. And that was basically, it was an exercise. I want to say, can I do a daily comic? Do a comic page every day?
Yeah.
And especially at that time, now my wife was going through surgery. So I was like, okay, this is a good way to document her surgery, her recovery, and, just kind of see what happens. But what I didn't know, when I started the comic in January of 2020, about 3 months later is when the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything happened. So it became a way of documenting just basically how crazy everything was.
Right.
So I did that for 3 years. And after 3 years, I was like, I cannot do a daily comic anymore. I was totally burned out and everything. But the thing was, since I did that daily comic for 3 years, it helped my storytelling, it helped my illustration. I became a better artist, and that's what I wanted. Yeah. So this year I started my new comic, my new project. It's called In the City, which in a way is a weird extension of 30 Miles of Crazy, of Queen City, and Lighthouse in the City, with the idea of telling stories set in a city, but instead of separate little vignettes and little short stories, trying to merge all these stories into a single narrative. And I do that like within the city. It's basically me and Kelly wandering the city and encountering people and situations, the good and bad of urban life. Sure. And just taking a moment to pause and look around the city around you and all the like huge skyscrapers of brick, glass, and steel. That's basically what I'm doing. I got the first part came out at SPX.
Yeah.
The second part came out just a month ago when I was exhibiting at Thought Bubble in the UK, and I had the second issue ready. And I'm hoping the third for Mocha in the spring.
Oh yeah.
And it's my plan is to tell it like I know where it's going. So it's going to be probably 5 parts for the full story.
Thank you. I mean, you're answering all of my questions, so thank you, Karl. And if I do go back in and delve into a bit further, just humor me in that regard.
Oh no problem.
And I dig it. Like I said, I have like two. I think I have two over here because I have it in the studio, and it's a unique style. I really dig the way you go about your work or what have you, and obviously seeing sort of the work that I have and the work that you were describing, a moment ago, city is the theme there, right? And what is it specifically about like cities that really, gets your attention that you want to cover this, cover the city from this standpoint, or maybe, spend a little bit more time on like those skyscrapers, or maybe those alleys, or, things of that nature. What is it about the city that is a big part of your storytelling?
Well, it wasn't planned to have every project have the name city. It just kind of happened that way.
Sure.
Well, I mean, the basic answer is I've only lived in cities. I've lived in Philly, I've lived in Boston, I've lived in Denver. I travel a lot. When I was living in Boston and Philly, I was in New York every so often because it's right in the middle. And when I travel, I'm not traveling out into the country. I'm traveling to other cities. I just got back from London, and it's great. And the thing I love about cities, I mean, there's so much. you know, people from everywhere. Like here in Denver, I can count on one hand the amount of people that are actually from Denver. Everyone seems to be from elsewhere, and they come with a different perspective, different culture, different cuisine. It's just the diversity of the people. I love the idea of all of us living on top of one another. You can't get away. And yeah, that can bring problems and clashes and stuff like that. But it also, I think, can bring a bit of empathy for the people around you, and then it's just the buildings, just skyscrapers. You see these buildings, especially when I was living in Boston, where you would see these old brownstones buildings that, were made back in the 19th century. And they're right next to like a modern skyscraper. I think that's fantastic. Especially like, in here, like in America, a bunch of Brits were kind of razzing me going like, you Americans think 100 years is like a long time ago. When you go to London and it's been there for like 500, 600, 700 years. So all of that. And like, I just love being in cities and seeing what's around the next corner and talking to people in cafes and bars and getting their story. And because of the diversity, you get this wide array of stories. And, I just feel safer in cities than any other part of the country. And yeah, I just love being there. I love being in a city that I've never been to before.
You're giving me rapid fire questions to ask you later, so you'll hear me typing. You'll see. I'm definitely a big fan of cities as well. I say this, and maybe it's more of a blunter thing or less refined thing, but I just think that that's where your culture is. I think that's where it's sort of concentrated. And one thing I'll add in it, and you touched on the empathy component. I think we had this sort of reset, back in 2020, and then sort of, I think we're moving away from it, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll say, I'm not spending too much time on Instagram these days, but at that time, I was on Instagram and it was some rando dude that just got on the video thing that was in Spain. And he was like, hope you guys are safe there. He's wanted to have a quick conversation with me. Never met him. And he was like, yeah, we're all here. We're all taking care of, just a human moment. And I was really trying to process it. And, it was just interesting. And he's like, yeah, we're in a city. The city has this going on. And I'm like, oh, right. This is just another human checking on me and seeing like these sort of really condensed populations and what things might be looking like where you're at. So that was just, a really cool moment. And, almost 4 years ago at this point, I still think about it. Yeah, I still think about that human moment.
That's brilliant. I mean, I also love the idea of like, it's less here in Denver. It was more pronounced when I was living out east. Like just the neighborhood feels of certain parts of the city. Like one part of the city might not feel like another part of the city. And again, it's more prevalent out on the east because the cities are older. Denver is a little over 100 years old. So.
Well, 100 years is not that
not
long.
Not that long at all. Yeah.
Yeah. I like Philly a lot. I go up there, semi-regularly, and I've done like a series of interviews up there as well. So, definitely I see sort of those similarities between where I'm based in Baltimore and in other sort of East Coast cities. Like it's literally right there. And you can almost look at the sort of layout. Go up there a few times. You're like, oh, that's the way this is configured. Oh, that's the same as ours in this way.
Yeah, and Philly and like Boston are completely different. Like Philly was built like just on a grid. They deliberately planned the city to be on a grid because they wanted to avoid the way London is, because London is just the streets are all over the place. Yeah. But like Boston, the streets are all over the place. There is no grid. It's just you got to know where you're going. And at Philly right now, I'm like kind of shocked and surprised because I left it a very long time. I left it like over 20 years ago. And it's like recently becoming a really big comic book cartoonist town. Lot of creators coming out of there. A lot of creators are moving there.
Yeah. And definitely is a spot that I enjoy doing stuff in, and I'm having a conversation very soon about doing some more work in the very near future. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to Philly probably. My family is still there, so I have to go back and visit and all that.
Oh yeah. So you touched on sort of like and it's a stamina thing, right? For me, last year I put out 333 interviews in a year.
Wow.
And I have a day job, I have all of the things. It's a stamina thing, right? And you were mentioning earlier about sort of doing the daily comic. And it's like, I don't know. Talk a bit about your like, drawing routine. How often are you drawing? How many hours per day? How do you structure your time around illustration, around drawing, around cartooning?
Well, pretty much this is my full-time gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, doing comics and illustration. Um, so I'm pretty much drawing every day. I try to take off weekends unless, again, there's something that really needs to get done ASAP. So I'm mostly working on my comics. Because of the Queen City book, which is all about Denver, I get a lot of commissions. Not just places here in Denver that want to be like an illustration or something like that, but in other places too. Boston, because there's still contacts there, and so I do a lot of pieces for them back there. Yeah, so I work Monday through Friday. In the morning is basically answering emails and seeing what else needs to get done. I usually start drawing whatever I need to get done that day around maybe 10 in the morning, and I work usually till at least 5 p.m. The way it usually goes is you can't see her, but my wife is literally behind me working. She still works from home, and so we're in this room together. She's working her job. I'm doing my illustrations, and she's a little more rigid than I am. She's like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'm off. And when she starts breaking down her computer and all that, and of course the cat knows it's feeding time, everything starts getting chaotic in here. So I'm like, okay, it's time to slowly break everything, stop what I'm doing, and maybe make myself a cocktail or go out to the bar for an hour or two before coming back. And and that's for the most part my routine. Some things change if, as I said, if something really needs to get done, I might work late into the night, or I was working a bit later trying to get the new comic ready for Thought Bubble. Yeah.
No, I think, I'm very interested and curious about like sort of what folks' routines are, like how they their stuff. Because I think it's something that's crossover in a way where it's like, well, I do this. I just throw a hammer at it in terms of time. It's just like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing this. And that leads to burnout,
Mm-hmm.
But seeing kind of how other people do their stuff, maybe you can put it through that filter, that sieve, if you will, and just figure out how you can apply that approach to what you're doing, or what I'm doing, or what someone listening to this is doing. And I think it's important.
Burnout's a complete thing. It does happen. I mean, as I said, like I was doing my Lighthouse series for 3 years, and what started off as like, okay, I'll do a single 4-panel comic a day, as the story I wanted to tell for that day became like, it might be longer. So some of my stories were like 3 pages. And so that to me was one comic that I put out one day, and the next day I had to put out something completely new. And also the burnout, like, oh, what the hell am I going to write about today or draw about today? And usually like when I rush, like when I got the second part of In the City finished, and it was a rush to get it done, get it to the printer, make sure I had copies in time, blah, blah. I had a couple days of burnout, and just worked on other stuff, commissions and stuff like that. I'm probably not going to start the next In the City comic for another week or two because I've got other stuff I need to get done.
Yeah, I mean, I pick up gigs on occasion to host a thing or to do a movie screening or anything along those lines, and it's a bit of a shakeup. And I've gotten a lot better. And this is not my full-time gig. This is a side project, but I'm very passionate and I spend a lot of time doing it. And just figuring out how to like carve out those pieces of time, because this is very important to me. I've been doing this for 15 years, so being able to sort of make my own lane, I think that's a very important thing to do. And, I look at, success, right, as, can I continue doing this? Do I feel like I'm satisfied? Am I happy doing it? And does it still feel fun? How do you look at like success in your career? Like this is your full-time thing. And you're crushing it. Like I said, I had no intention of buying any books. And I was like, I gotta talk to Karl. I gotta buy something. And now we're doing this. So I think this was a successful interaction in that regard.
I mean, how do I measure success? Man, I'm hoping just people read my comics. There's a small part, and it was like, am I paying my bills? Yes, I'm paying my bills. I'm getting by. Yes, we're in a small place, but we have enough funds to travel to New York to do MoCA or down to Bethesda to do SPX. As long as I'm getting by, I'm not as struggling as badly as I was a couple of years ago. Again, as your career goes on, hopefully it gets a little easier. So yeah, that's my measure of success. Of course, there's other things I would love to accomplish, like getting my work more out there for people to see. Because right now, I'm an indie cartoonist. It's hard getting distribution or finding a publisher that believes in your work. So yeah, so you always have goals, but as long as you're getting by, yeah, you're successful.
That.
The fact that I was just in the UK, doing a show, and people were approaching me knowing my work.
Yeah,
that's kind of a blast. You're just like, wow, whoa. Yeah.
My partner, she reminded me, she was there with me at SPX, and she reminded me, because you'll get down. It's that part of the year where it's like, I don't know, guys, I don't know how this thing is gonna go. And she was like, you had someone stop in traffic, was like, hey man, I don't mean to fanboy out, but I know you're Rob Lee. And I was like,
yeah,
oh hey man.
And that's always appreciated. I never, you're never going to go, like, someone approaches you going, hey, I really like your work. You're not going to go, oh, fuck off. No, you appreciate it.
Yes, I never. Maybe I've said that in my mind, but not in real life. No.
The only time someone approached me in Toronto when I was exhibiting at TCAF, and they were talking. They're like, oh, they approached me like they knew me and all that, and they started talking to me, and I realized quickly they had no idea who I was. They were like, oh, I love all the work you did for DC. And I'm like, I never worked for DC, stuff like that. That's a bit weird, but you play it cool, go, oh, thank you very much, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm a very, I don't know how well you remember me. I'm very tall. And I always get confused with other podcasters or other people. I'm like, look, there's more than two different Black people here. Can we act in accordance? And, but yeah, it's like, when someone makes that sort of thing that they dig what I'm doing, I always try to do the chit chat. I talk a lot because of the nature of this. So I'm much better in this sort of capacity versus, in person. Like, I'm one-to-one. And I think that's why, I like SPX and things of that nature with sort of the indie folks, like, you guys are much more accessible. You guys are much more like open to have a dialogue. And, this is the second year that I've gone, and I'll go again in the future. But I always leave out buying a bunch of books, a bunch of stuff, because it's like, I actually feel like I'm supporting folks or what have you who are going at it on their own. And I just like sort of value and admire that lifestyle, because tangentially, I'm kind of doing my own version of that.
Mm-hmm. All of us are doing the same thing. And this industry is very small. So the best, I was like, don't be a dick. We're all in this together. Treat other people with respect, and you'll get respect back. Even the most famous of our indie cartoonists, we're all still indie cartoonists. No one knows who the hell we are, aside from our little community.
Right. I tell people that in this sort of podcast sector. I was like, we're just podcasters from Baltimore. We're going to get washed out in the algorithm. It's fine. It's all good.
And it's also weird, like, we're all creating on our own, like cartoonists. I just sit here at my drawing table and draw my little stories and stuff like that. So 95% of the time I'm working by myself. It's those 5% of the time where I'm actually talking to other people at shows and stuff like that you're like, oh, wait, someone's reading what I'm doing. Oh, that's awesome.
Well, that's almost a really good segue into this sort of next chunk of questions that I have. So could you speak on any like mentors or like pivotal experience that kind of shape where you're at and how you approach your work, sort of having your philosophy on how you do your work, your philosophy on sort of the networking component, even doing something like this? Is there anything sort of like pivotal that comes to mind in terms of mentors or in terms of like experiences that has been really impactful in your career thus far?
Well, the first, if I don't know if I can ever say I had a mentor.
Sure.
However, when I was very young in Philadelphia, my uncle was a painter. It wasn't his full-time job. He wasn't doing it professionally, but he was a painter. And so, like, sitting in his studio, like, you're 8 years old, watching him paint, that kind of made me want to start creating stuff and do my own thing. Yeah. And he stopped painting probably while I was a teenager. And so when I went over his places, there was all these unfinished canvases and stuff like that. And he was also, I actually kind of appreciate this. He was a very low rent painter. Like he would go to he wouldn't go buy canvases. He would go to the junkyard, buy pieces of wood that he would find wicked cheap and just paint on those. And so after he passed a few years ago, I had to go back into his studio and start going through his things. Okay, we can get rid of this. I found his files of all his rejection letters, which I kept. I was like, keep you humble. Here's what Bob went through. So yeah, that, and then it was the reason I started doing comics was because when I was working at the comic book shop in Philly, I was always like, I should do a comic about this. I should do a comic about this. And it was my coworkers who are friends of mine. I'm still friends with them. They kind of like, just do it. Like, just do it. Why do you keep talking? Just do it. And a friend of mine who actually was doing a comic at the time said, hey, if you do a comic, I'll include it in my comic. And that was my first published work. It wasn't very good, but it was my first published work. And that kind of put me on the road. As for like, other things like people that I admire and stuff like that, like, the first name that springs to mind is Evan Dorkin. I was growing up with his work and his kind of like punk rock, Milk and Cheese and Pirate Core and all that, Hectic Planet and all that. I adored that. And basically that was my first entry, because before that I was reading, I was like everyone else, I was reading X-Men,
Yeah.
And that was my start of reading, getting into the indie world, which led to Love and Rockets, 8 Ball and all that. And 8 Ball, when he was doing the Ghost World series, that along with Seth's Palookaville,
mm-hmm.
that was a huge influence on me in terms of color, because both use this blue in their stories that I adopted as well, because I thought the blue most of my work is in blue and gray, all my coloring work, and I thought it worked. I like it, and I thought it brought, since I'm telling stories about the city, it brought this kind of noir feel to it, right. a little melancholy. I just really, really like it, and so those were a huge influence on me. And lastly, just having other peers in the comic book community, someone to talk to, because as I said, all of us are going through these things. All of us are like, have moments of doubt and stuff like that. And having another cartoonist to talk to is great. I'm on a couple comic book threads, like just messaging groups, and just be like, hey, what are you working on right now? Just kind of keep us all together and moving forward.
Yeah, community is super important in that regard. Yeah. I've talked about it a few times in this pod, but I've been afforded the opportunity to do some educating, some teaching at a few different, high school and college, right? And teaching specifically podcasting, because it can be a very lonely thing, and then there's no one out there to teach you, and you get really caught on the numbers, or you get into a bad deal that doesn't really fit. And like I said, I've been doing it for a very long time. So I'm like, learn from my mistakes. I've made them all. Yeah. And being able to sort of share that, but also being a resource, like anyone who's, doing a podcast or doing something in sort of that new media space, I try to make myself available in that way of, hey, I run an idea by me, or if you need help with how you go about something, or if you just need someone to edit something for you, I can help out. And because I think, one, I didn't really have that there. And eventually you find some folks that, know a few things and you kind of like learn some stuff. But, for the first 5 years of me doing podcasting at home, I didn't have anyone. I was just like figuring it out, seat of my pants style, and investing money in different places. And, at the time you mentioned it, hey, I got this bill for this editor or what have you. Someone looks at you like you're crazy, but it's just like, this is what I'm doing. And now when I have the opportunity to talk with someone and make their load a little bit lighter, especially when it comes to podcasting, that's what I'm there to do, whether it be knowledge, whether it be someone as a sounding board, someone to commiserate with, what have you.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, there are a couple comic book schools. I didn't go to one. I learned I went to school for photography. So, basically it's okay, this seems to work. And again, since, sometimes something cool comes out of it because you don't know what you're doing, something cool comes out.
Yeah.
And it's also like cool, talking to cartoonists, seeing what tools they're using, what kind of brush they're using, what kind of paper they're using. It's all great. I mean, that's the one thing is like, it seems like a lot of cartoonists now are just switching all to digital, which I really don't. I use my Mac for coloring, but all my pages are like ink on Bristol.
Yeah, I'm looking over your shoulder right now.
Yeah, well, there's a print on my drawing table right now that someone is coming by to purchase.
Love it.
Yeah,
and so I got like two more real questions, and then I have those rapid fire questions I've been fiercely editing. So I want to talk a little bit about collaboration. Like previously, you're the second interview from the folks that I connected with at SPX. Jonathan Bayless was the first one. And I remember you being on the panel with him.
Oh, Jonathan.
I mean, he's an Aquarius, so I have to like show love. Me and him have like very similar births. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
I'm a Libra, so I'm like a typical Libra.
Oh, air sign gang,
Yeah.
So what do you think is like that sort of like key to like successful collaboration? Like, and for setting the stage, like, as Jonathan said, he's the writer and you worked on some projects with him and you were the illustrator. Mm-hmm. And, my partner's in a similar spot now where she's a writer, doesn't know how to draw. And I'm kind of a writer. I used to know how to draw. So it's kind of like, I'm very curious about sort of what does successful collaboration, in your opinion, look like?
Well, it was much easier with Jonathan. Since I've known Jonathan, I'm friends with Jonathan. We didn't go into this cold. I've known him for a couple of years. So, we razz each other all the time because, he's unfortunately from New York City. That's why like in my comment, like that was also the interesting thing with when he approached me with the story. I'm in it. Like most of his stories is just him talking about a certain subject or something that happened to him. But in this case, like I'm actually in the story. So I got to like draw myself. And of course he threw in a bunch of Boston, like, ragging on Boston. So I drew him in like, a Red Sox cap to rag on him. But anyway, but still there was a trust and respect between the two of us. So it was really easy to work with him. It was only a 3-page story. But there were still times where like I had to approach him going, okay, because he breaks down the panel. He sends me a comic book script going panel 1, panel 2, panel 3. And there's a couple times I was like, oh, I think this would work better if we slow it down and maybe extend it into 2-3 panels. So, I tell him my ideas and, thankfully he's kind of like, if it works, it works, go for it. But it also works both ways too, because when I actually finished the pages and I was showing them, like, emailing them to him, there was a couple times he's like, I don't like your color choices here. Can you change this and change this? Which of course I'm like, that's fine. I have no problem with that. He's paying me, so I want him to be happy.
Yeah.
So it was easy. Basically, like, when you go into a collaboration like this, you got to have the respect. You got to have an open mind to be able to discuss things. And the main thing is not to act like an artistic diva of some sort, like going, oh, no, my work is perfect. No, it's not. So, yeah, it was really easy to work with him. I'd do it again. And then, of course, like after I did the pages, he came back to me because, of course, he's seen my other work. And he asked me to do the cover as well, which, again, we sat down at we were together at Mocha last year, and that's when we were hashing through everything. And he gave me a couple ideas that he wanted for the cover, all of which we didn't use.
That's great.
I was like, what about that? And I sent him a couple sketches. He's like, oh, yeah, that works. And again, since I draw cityscapes, it was a cityscape with a big billboard advertising his comic. It worked. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this is the sort of last real question. And this is sort of in that space of, sort of final thoughts, those gems that folks put out there. What is one thing, like, towards the top, that you wish you knew earlier about the indie comics, cartooning, about the industry that you're in?
There is no money. There is no money, especially in the indie comic world. You're doing it for the love of the art. Sure, I mean, it's nice when you do make some money, but in the long term, there really isn't. I make, as I said, most of my money from prints and commissions and stuff like that, and hopefully, like, people who've picked up like my Queen City book, they like these illustrations, so hopefully they'll come around to the comics. Yeah. There is a lot of hustling, a lot, and it seems like even the people that you think, oh my God, like, the people that you look up to, all of us are flying by the seat of our pants, just getting by. Again, we're indie cartoonists. We're not doing superheroes. We're doing our little stories about life, So yeah, there's a lot of hustle. Yeah, which also, at the same time, things could look bleak, like, because you're not getting the feedback you like. You want to get, break through that next level and stuff like that. But yeah, you got to keep going, because this is the life we've chosen for ourselves.
No, it's a great answer.
Yeah. And they basically, the thing, like, there's places I want to get to. There's goals I want to get to. And there's times like you want to jump forward ahead a couple feet, and you actually realize, no, you're moving in inches, but you're still moving. Yeah. And once you get to a point and goal, you can look behind you and going, wow, I came pretty far. So yeah, so again, yeah, there's times it's going to be like really rough, but that's again what I said earlier about having a cartoonist community to kind of be almost a support group.
Yeah. So it's keep going. It's in that first year, I referenced earlier, like what I did last year, 300 plus. And that first year of me doing this, I only did 20 interviews. I couldn't get anybody booked. And seeing that, and now like there's a degree of exclusivity here. There's a degree of, no, this is a rite of passage. Have you been on this podcast yet? Have you come on and shared your story yet?
That's great.
Yeah. And it's, really being able to look at that and seeing sort of the progression at that time, but then at the same time, getting that sort of that kick in the dick, if you will, of, oh, right, this had 2 downloads. That sucks. And you put so much energy and time into it. But at the same time, it's like, that's one of those sort of inches, I guess. Yeah.
And social media does not help you. I mean, what I mean is, you see other people on social media going, oh, they're doing great. Why did I only get 2 likes? You got to kind of like push that out. One of the things I try to do is, like, when I see another cartoonist and like their work only has 1 or 2 likes, just hit like. It might make his day,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, like with your podcast and stuff like that, a good feeling is when you've been working on something for a long time. And like, I look at my comics that I was doing 3 years ago compared to the comics I'm doing today. You can see a definite improvement, and that's a great feeling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I think that was the good spot for us to end on the real questions. And now,
okay.
I got these rapid fire questions. As I tell everyone, do not overthink these. Whatever your
Okay.
answer
This is
is,
just like right off the
right
top of your head.
off the top of the dome. All
Okay.
right. Here's the first one. I can't help but notice that you're a very, very, very stylish individual. I'm looking at your glasses and I'm kind of jealous, if I must be, honest.
Out of online.
What is your favorite type of accessory or article of clothing? Like I've seen some really cool hats that you've had on, things of that nature.
My hats. My hats. I love my hats. My hats and my glasses. Like, it's funny, like, I started wearing hats before I left Philly. Just because of Tom Waits. Love Tom Waits hats. I wanted a Tom Waits hat. I now have a collection of like many, many hats to the point where I had to get rid of a bunch of them. I also love my glasses. I love the round glasses. When you hit a certain age and your warranty's off and your eyes start to go, it happens. So I started wearing reading glasses. And one day I was in a shop with my wife, Kelly, and I just saw these pair of round glasses. I was like, oh, let me try these on. And Kelly's like, you're going to look like an idiot. And I put them on, and Kelly's like, oh, wait a minute. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. So I've been having round glasses and a hat for years now. And I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. It gets me recognized all the time because of the glasses and the hat.
It's a signature. It's a signature.
I remember, I think it was years ago, the Crumb documentary that I think in it, he said he got rid of his hat because it became basically, oh, it's a hat, it's Crumb's hat. And he just got rid of it. But as I said, I love my hats. So yeah. I
dig it. Here's the next one I got for you. So you mentioned, like you enjoy the cities. So I enjoy traveling as well. I enjoy going to a city, what is the first thing you do when you get to like a new city, a city you've never been to? Let's say you checked in and all of that stuff, but let's say you're going to explore. What is the first thing that you're doing?
Find a decent bar. Find a decent bar. You can tell more about a neighborhood or a city by the bars. What Kelly and I do, what we try to do when we go to a new city, is find the oldest bar in the city and go there and have a drink and just meet the locals and stuff like that. That's usually the first thing we do when we travel.
I like that answer.
And it just happens we love bars, so yeah.
I usually do the coffee shop. It's usually the first thing that I'm definitely gonna have.
It also okay. I would also say it depends upon the time if it's 10 a.m. when you land, you're not going to bar. Go up to lunch, sure, yeah. But yeah, usually find out, like, sometimes we look around if we're going to be in a strange city. Like before we go, we look around like on Google Maps and go, okay, this is the area we're going to be in. What's cool there? We usually look for a cool bar. We usually look for a cool vintage shop, cool bookshop. Where's the comic book store? Stuff like that.
All right, Kate. This is the last one. This is the last one. Again, I like having people kind of like put out their dark secrets, their inner secrets. What is a song that you really like that on the low you're a little ashamed that you like it?
Okay. I can't think of like anything like, like scandalous or something like that. Someone asked me this the other day. Someone asked me the other day that, and actually, okay, I can't name the woman. It was what's her name? The Australian singer. I can't get you out of my head.
Oh, Kylie Minogue.
Kylie Minogue, yeah. My wife is actually behind me going, Kylie Minogue. So basically, why do I? It's kind of like an earworm in my head. Someone asked me that the other day because he was putting together like a bingo playlist, and he's like, what is a shameful secret song? And I said, okay, yeah, that one. Yeah, that's one. Yeah.
It's out there. I like it. And
there's also been, okay, again, I'm older. I don't know the kids' music any right now. And the same guy that I just mentioned, who's doing these musical bingos, he does it every couple, like 2-3 weeks at one of the bars I go to. So I was chatting with him, and he usually plays the video, and if you got a bingo card, you cross off that song that's on your bingo card. And so a lot of the newer songs, I have no idea what it is. And there was some artist then I'm like, what the hell is this? And the song's been going through my head. Someone called Oliver Tree. Do you know this guy?
Oh,
No, he looks weird. He's got this bowl haircut that I think's a wig, and he just does this kind of pop song that's been rolling around my head. I think the song's called Alien Boy. That's been rolling around my head. I have no idea who he is.
Oh, he looks ridiculous. That's
See?
a lot.
Yeah.
I'm starting to age out a little bit myself, where me and my partner, she's like, is this a TikTok? Is this a TikTok song? I'm not sure what this is. Is this a real song or a TikTok? And I'm getting closer to 40. So I'm like, I don't know what's new or what's not. I just know what I like.
I remember we were listening when we were in our late 30s. My wife and I were in our late 30s. There was an NPR story talking about how, like, at 35, 35 is when you stop discovering new music. And we were like, oh, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. When I hit 40, I'm like, what's going on now? What are these kids doing today? I have no idea. Let me put a Tom Waits album on.
Put my hat on with it.
Yeah, put my hat on.
So that's pretty much it. Thank you. This has been great. And secondly, in me being just a big rube here, I want to, again, thank you for coming on. And secondly, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can check you out, your work, social media, website, any of that stuff. It's shameless plug time.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much. I'm on the Blue Sky. I'm on the Mastodon. I'm still on Twitter. I don't go on there very often, but I still have my account there. But it's all Karl C. Krumpholz, at Karl C. Krumpholz. My website's carlchristiankrumpholz.com. I have that website. I have an Etsy shop, Karl C. Krumpholz, that has all my comics on it. Yeah.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Karl Christian Krumpholz for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.